The Galactic Empire had not been challenged in 312 standard cycles, and even the word challenge felt like an indulgence rather than a truth. Conquest had become procedural. Resistance was catalogued, analyzed, and dissolved with the same detached efficiency used to regulate trade routes or recalibrate orbital defenses. Empires were not built on passion, they were built on inevitability. The Great Council Chamber reflected that belief perfectly. It was a structure grown rather than built, layers of bioarchitected stone and living crystal spiraling upward into a ceiling so distant it faded into darkness. Light came not from lamps but from energy veins pulsing slowly through the walls, responding to the collective biosignatures of the species present. The more powerful the civilization, the stronger the glow around its seeding ring. The center floated the imperial sigil, a massive geometric construct that rotated with precise slowness, symbolizing balance, order, and unbreakable hierarchy. Beneath it, representatives of nearly 4,000 sentient species observed, calculated, and waited. This was not a place of debate anymore. That era had ended centuries ago. The Council no longer decided if something would happen, only how efficiently. The matter of the day was Earth. Most members of the Council regarded the name with mild disinterest. Humanity was filed under emerging civilizations, Class C, technologically competent but socially volatile, capable of producing impressive bursts of innovation followed by periods of internal collapse. They were known for paradoxes, cooperative yet combative, empathetic yet destructive, idealistic yet brutally pragmatic when threatened. The Empire had allowed them a diplomatic seat less out of respect and more out of habit. Granting observation status smoothed absorption later. The humans were expected to fracture on their own within a few centuries regardless. Empires had patience measured in millennia. When the human representative entered the chamber, there was no ripple of reaction. She walked alone and a guard followed her. No defensive drones hovered nearby. No ceremonial attire marked her as important. She wore neutral fabrics designed for comfort rather than intimidation, colored in subdued tones that blended easily with the ambient lighting. Her pace was unhurried, neither deferential nor confrontational. She moved like someone entering a familiar room rather than the most powerful political chamber in the known galaxy. Several council members noted this with mild curiosity. Others flagged it as a cultural misunderstanding. Humans often failed to grasp the symbolic language of power. She stopped at the designated position for non-core species envoys and waited an OBOW.NO proclamation to NO attempt to draw attention. The Imperial High Speaker, a massive being of layered chitin and luminescent membranes, initiated the session. Its voice resonated across the chamber without amplification, carried on harmonic frequencies that translated automatically for all present. The Empire acknowledged the arrival of Earth's representative. Formalities were observed. Protocols were recited. Historical summaries were displayed across the shared cognitive lattice. Humanity's rise from planetary conflict to limited interstellar travel unfolded in clean, compressed data streams. Wars, recoveries, breakthroughs, collapses, unity movements, fragmentation, reunification. A predictable pattern. The Empire had seen it thousands of times. What was less predictable was the human woman's expression as the summary played. She did not look impressed or defensive. She did not attempt to interject or correct the record. Her face remained composed, eyes attentive, posture relaxed but aligned. She absorbed the narrative of her species as if listening to an old story she already knew by heart. When the Imperial speaker concluded, the tone shifted subtly. The Empire expressed concern over Earth's rapid militarization, concern over unauthorized expansion beyond permitted trade corridors, concern over repeated violations of containment advisories issued for the protection of humanity and neighboring systems. The language was neutral, dispassionate, almost kind. The Empire did not threaten. It did not accuse. It simply explained consequences as one might explain gravity. The woman diplomat listened without interruption. When it was her turn to speak, she did not begin immediately. She paused, just long enough for several council members to register discomfort. Silence was unusual here. Most envoys rushed to fill it, afraid of appearing uncertain. She was not. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and unremarkable in tone. There was no attempt at rhetorical flourish. Earth acknowledged the Empire's concerns. Earth valued peace. Earth had no intention of destabilizing the region. She used language so carefully measured it almost disappeared into itself. Some members of the Council relaxed. This was familiar. Emerging civilizations always sounded like this at first. Gratitude, assurances, willingness to cooperate. But then she asked a question. It was not confrontational. It was framed as a request for clarification. She asked how many independent species the Empire currently governed by force rather than treaty. The chamber stilled, not dramatically, but perceptibly. The question was not forbidden, but it was unnecessary. The answer was publicly available. The Empire did not hide its conquests. The imperial speaker answered without hesitation. Thousands. The woman nodded slowly, as if confirming a calculation. She asked another question. How many of those species had once been offered protective oversight similar to what Earth was now receiving? There was a fractional pause before the answer came. Most. Still no reaction from her. No visible judgment. She asked a third question. How many of those species had voluntarily remained within the Empire once technological parity was achieved? The answer was fewer. The Council exchanged subtle signals. Data tags passed quietly between intelligence representatives. This line of questioning was unusual. Not dangerous, but inconvenient. Humans were known for asking inefficient questions. Emotional ones. Philosophical ones. The Empire responded anyway. The woman thanked them and said nothing more. No demands. No objections. No resistance. To the observers, it looked like compliance. After the session ended, internal analyses circulated rapidly. The consensus was reassuring. Earth's envoy was intelligent but ultimately constrained by her civilization's limitations. Curiosity did not equate to defiance. The questions were likely a domestic performance, gestures meant to placate Earth's internal factions resistant to integration. The recommendation was to proceed. Pressure would be applied gradually. Access limitations. Resource tariffs. Strategic restrictions framed as safety measures. Earth would adapt, as all others had. The woman diplomat returned to Earth without incident. Months passed. During that time, the Empire observed increasing human activity. Not militarily aggressive, but reorganized. Supply chains shifted. Civilian infrastructure expanded in patterns that did not align with economic projections. Communications traffic intensified, but encryption protocols remained within acceptable civilian ranges. Empire analysts flagged it as internal consolidation. Humans were prone to overreaction. Fear often drove inefficient resource allocation. The Empire adjusted containment measures slightly. Earth responded not with protest, but with silence. No appeals. No escalation. Another council session was convened. The woman returned, same attire, same posture, same calm. The Empire noticed the first losses 12 hours after the declaration. At first, they were not called losses at all. A supply flotilla failed to arrive at its scheduled relay point. A border patrol reported silence from a listening array that had functioned without interruption for 3 centuries. A gate activation returned incomplete telemetry, its exit coordinates registering as mathematically valid yet physically empty. None of these events were unprecedented. Space was vast. Systems failed. Crews made errors. The Empire prided itself on redundancy precisely because small problems were inevitable, so it adjusted routes. It reassigned fleets. It waited. By the 24th hour, the waiting began to feel unfamiliar. Imperial war doctrine was based on overwhelming presence. Fleets advanced visibly, broadcasting strength, forcing the enemy to choose between immediate submission or certain destruction. Against humanity, the opening moves followed this doctrine perfectly. 3 armadas crossed into human-controlled space along separate vectors, their drives burning bright enough to be seen from inhabited worlds. Human sensors detected them. Human worlds went dark, not in panic. In precision, civilian traffic vanished from open channels. Orbital infrastructure powered down or slipped into low-emission states. Entire planets reduced their electromagnetic signatures until they resembled uninhabited rocks. To the Empire's commanders, it looked like retreat. They advanced faster. When the first armada reached the outskirts of a human system designated as strategically irrelevant, they found no resistance. No mines. No fleets. No transmissions. The system's primary planet showed signs of recent habitation but no active defenses. The Imperial Admiral declared it secured and ordered resupply vessels forward. They never arrived. Instead, the star began to fluctuate, not violently. Not immediately. Just enough to be noticed by long-range instruments. A subtle modulation in output, a pattern too regular to be natural. Imperial scientists aboard the flagship began running diagnostics, searching for stellar instability. They found human engineering signatures embedded deep within the star's magnetic fields. The realization came too late. The star did not explode. Humans did not waste energy on spectacle. The modulation increased slowly, disrupting fusion equilibrium just enough to make the system uninhabitable for Imperial technology. Shields failed first. Then life support. Then drives. By the time the Admiral understood that retreat was impossible, the fleet was already dying. No human ships appeared. No messages were sent. The Empire marked the system as lost to stellar anomaly and moved on. Across a dozen fronts, similar patterns emerged. Human worlds offered no direct resistance, drawing Imperial forces deeper, stretching supply lines thinner. Each advance was met not with battle, but with absence. Systems that should have supported fleets became traps. Refueling depots were intact but unusable, their matter subtly altered to react explosively with Imperial fuel compositions. Gates functioned once, then collapsed behind those who used them. Imperial commanders began to argue. Some insisted this was coincidence, a series of unfortunate but unrelated events. Others suggested sabotage on a scale that implied years of preparation. That idea was dismissed at first. Humanity had been under observation since contact. They had not demonstrated the unity or foresight required for such coordination. Yet the evidence accumulated, captured human data cores, recovered from abandoned outposts, revealed doctrines the Empire had never modeled. Humans did not plan wars as sequences of battles. They planned them as systems of collapse. Every engagement was secondary to logistics. Every target chosen not for symbolic value, but for cascading effect. One recovered document, flagged for high-level review, contained a simple principle attributed to an unnamed commander: if the enemy can move, they can fight. If they can think, they can adapt. Remove both, and the war ends itself. Imperial analysts struggled to translate the concept into their frameworks. The idea of intentionally avoiding decisive battles ran counter to everything the Empire believed about warfare. Victory was supposed to be visible. It was meant to be witnessed. Humanity did not seem to care who saw them. By the third day, the Empire's internal communication networks began to suffer disruptions. Not complete shutdowns, but delays measured in seconds that compounded into chaos. Orders arrived too late. Updates contradicted reality. Fleet commanders acted on outdated information and paid for it with entire task forces. Worse, something unprecedented occurred. Human transmissions began to appear inside Imperial space, not propaganda. Not threats. Historical records. Footage of human wars fought before they ever reached the stars. Cities reduced to rubble. Soldiers advancing through fire with expressions devoid of hesitation. Civilian populations enduring sieges that lasted years. Commentary was minimal, factual, unemotional. Alongside the footage came projections, casualty estimates. Infrastructure lost timelines. Recovery durations measured in generations. The message accompanying them was identical across all channels. This is what happens when humans decide a war must end. Some Imperial worlds panicked. Others dismissed the broadcasts as psychological tactics. A few, more cautious, began evacuations without waiting for orders. The Empire Senate convened in emergency session. Accusations flew. Admirals blamed intelligence. Intelligence blamed cultural analysts. Cultural analysts insisted the humans were acting out of character. Then a new report arrived, this one impossible to ignore. An entire Imperial fleet had surrendered, not after defeat. Not after losses. They surrendered intact, their crews broadcasting unconditional capitulation before any engagement occurred. When questioned, the fleet's commander provided a single explanation. We were already dead, the commander said. We simply chose when to stop moving. The Empire demanded details. The commander described systems failing one by one. Food synthesizers contaminated by microscopic alterations in matter. Navigation databases corrupted in ways that produced plausible but fatal errors. Crew morale eroded by the certainty that no action led to survival. They knew us, the commander said. They knew how we think. They knew what we would prioritize. Every decision we made was already accounted for. Imperial investigators traced the origins of the sabotage back years, even decades. Human merchant vessels that had passed through Imperial space long before hostilities. Cultural exchange programs. Shared research initiatives. All benign on the surface, all quietly gathering data. Humanity had not been preparing for this war since first contact. They had been preparing since first curiosity. As the situation deteriorated, attention turned inevitably to the human general who had spoken the declaration. Imperial intelligence attempted to locate her command center, her flagship, any sign of centralized control. They found nothing. Human command structures were distributed, adaptive, deliberately opaque. Orders propagated through layers designed to function even if entire regions were destroyed. The general's influence appeared only in doctrine. In the consistency of execution across disparate forces, she was not directing battles. She had designed a way of fighting. A captured human officer, when interrogated, explained it without drama. She told us to end the war, the officer said, not to win it. The Empire's attempts at counteroffensives grew increasingly desperate. Fleets launched without full logistical support, hoping to force a confrontation that would reset the dynamics of the conflict. Each time, they found nothing to fight until it was too late to escape. On the fourth day, the Empire issued a request not for surrender. For talks, the message was carefully worded, framed as a desire to de-escalate, to prevent unnecessary suffering on both sides. It was transmitted through multiple channels, prioritized for immediate delivery. No response came. Instead, Imperial worlds began receiving evacuation corridors, coordinates and time windows calculated to avoid human interdiction zones. The implication was unmistakable. Humans were not trying to trap civilians. They were trying to remove them. This act unsettled the Empire more than any act of violence could have. Empires understood cruelty. They understood domination. They did not understand mercy deployed as a strategic weapon. DS systems fell silent and fleets vanished into statistical improbability. A realization spread through the Empire's highest ranks. The human general's declaration had not been a beginning. It had been an ending. The war was not something humanity was entering. It was something they had already solved, waiting only for permission to execute. And when the Empire had laughed, when it had dismissed a single sentence spoken without anger or fear, it had unknowingly given that permission. Somewhere beyond Imperial senses, human fleets adjusted course again, not toward conquest, but toward conclusion. The Empire, for the first time in its long history, began to understand what it meant to face an enemy that did not seek to rule, only to be left alone.